The Falklands' breathtaking array of wildlife has been well studied over the decades. The group of elephant seals on Sea Lion Island, one of the most studied groups of their kind. However, the islands and their surrounding waters still hold many secrets. At 50 feet long and weighing as much as 28 tons, Sei whales are the fastest of the great whales, with only orcas and pilot whales able to outswim this ocean giant. Their speed has drawn comparisons to the world's fastest land mammal, the cheetah, as Sei whales can reach speeds of up to 23 miles an hour in short bursts. But despite their speed, this enigmatic species is endangered, as over 150,000 were killed during the 20th century, leaving the species close to extinction when commercial whaling for sei whales ended in 1977. Today, it's a different story, as numbers have risen back to 1/3 of their original population. However, there are still fears over the future of this elusive cetacean. Falklands Conservation is undertaking extensive work looking into candidate key biodiversity areas in the Falklands, known as KBAs. The research is primarily being done to build up information on significant species in the islands, to allow the decision makers in local government to take appropriate action concerning the environment, highlighting the part the local community has to play in the protection of sei whales and their habitat.
All the amazing wildlife that we have in the islands, it is a national asset. It's everybody, all the local community members are stakeholders in how decisions are made, or in how they influence the decision makers as to what they think the environment should be used for, or how it should be treated and managed. So it's incredibly important that people have as much understanding of what's going on as possible with biodiversity in the islands, and from our perspective the best way to try to achieve that and to help people get an understanding is to engage them in our work, give them the opportunities to join us and see what we do and how we're doing it, and what information that's generating, and in some instances how difficult it is to get information on these species and what the costs and challenges are. But fundamentally, we want to get information out to all local community members so they can understand more about the amazing animals, about their ecology and what they're doing in the Falkland Islands, and the kind of things that might influence why they're here, or which way their population goes, whether they're under threat from anything, and just make it a real sort of community awareness issue.
During the first phase of the study, lead researcher Caroline Weir and the team from Falklands Conservation explored the candidate key biodiversity area in Berkeley Sound, conducting photo identification, fecal sampling and genetic biopsy work from on board a 6.5-metre rib. This year, Caroline, alongside volunteers Maria Taylor and Pamela Halves, embarked on a complete circumnavigation of the Falklands on board the famous Golden Fleece, captained by Jerome Ponce, a combination that has explored some of the most remote parts of the South Atlantic Ocean.
So on this yacht it's been slightly different, logistically different, and different challenges. So we haven't done nearly as much small boat work, and we've only managed to collect kind of 7 or so fecal samples, purely because it takes time to launch the smaller dinghy, and it's far more weather limited and by the time we get to the fecal samples, they sink very fast in the water column, so the amount of sample that we're able to collect is a little bit less. But that said, it's still been successful, and it's been a kind of a learning curve for next time in terms of the platforms and what we can achieve from each platform. The yacht does enable us to work in far worse weather conditions, so kind of a bow foot 4 and a couple of metres of swell. So in terms of covering this very large area of the KBAs, it's given us a really good scope to get further offshore and work in choppier sea conditions. So we've been able to work on most days and collect a really good spatial data set on whale distribution and group sizes across the entire area, which we probably wouldn't have been able to get from the RIB, which would have been very limited to working within bays and more shallow sheltered waters.
Though they travelled around the whole of the Falklands, most of the surveying work took place in Queen Charlotte Bay and King George Bay, areas that the team had been told were hotspots for whales. Whilst there, landowners from Spring Point, Port Stephens and Coast Ridge spent 8 days taking a hands-on approach to understanding and assisting the survey work.
I took the opportunity up because I've lived in the Queen Charlotte Bay area for a long time, and it's quite an opportunity to witness sei whales from a different perspective. As a kid, as growing up, you'd always see the sei whales come around summertime. It was quite happy memories, I suppose. And then when the opportunity came up, I thought it was quite a good way to see sei whales from a different perspective, get involved in the science, and sort of gained a bit more of an interest and knowledge, so I can probably project my career in this sort of way.
The data collected in Berkeley Sound proved that the whales were using a larger area than previously anticipated, and the survey work from the Golden Fleece seems to suggest a similar pattern.
Generally what we found is that the whales are pretty much everywhere we've been. They're very close inshore at times, within 100 metres of the coast where the water depth's sufficient, and they're also far offshore in open waters. So it seems like really the entire area we've surveyed, which is from the coast to approximately 100 metres of depth, is important for sei whales, and there's not really been any particular hotspots within that area where we could draw a line around and say this area should be protected specifically. It really feels like the animals are moving over this entire shelf area. So the KBAs that have currently been delimited, there are sei whales in them, but what we find is that there's also sei whales outside of them in pretty much all of the areas we've surveyed. So those kind of the effectiveness of those KBAs for protecting sei whales in future years will have to be assessed.
In addition to the fecal samples and the genetic biopsy work, Caroline and her team have been collecting bone samples as well to help understand how the species has coped with being brought to the brink of extinction.
Samples, we collected some in Stanley last year, so people have various whale artifacts laying around their gardens and around the museums and so on. So we went round people's houses really and had a look at the vertebrae and ribs that they had in their gardens, and we drilled several of those from around Stanley. And then this season we've been on several of the islands. We've managed to pick up bone samples, and that's particularly the case with New Island, because obviously there was a big whaling station on New Island. Early in the 1900s it was operational, and they caught a lot of sei whales there and a few other species. So there's a large number, it was over 1,000 whales were taken at New Island. So there's a large number of bone fragments still remaining on the beaches at New Island around where the whaling station was. So we spent 2 days there collecting all these bone fragments, and they will also be shipped off to the British Antarctic Survey, who have a molecular lab for doing the analysis of those. And the type of information we're looking for, we're able to extract DNA from the bone, so whale DNA, so we can identify what species they came from, and also probably look at population genetics, so individual diversity within the whale population, and how that's changed compared to modern whale populations, whether the whaling era impacted diversity of the whales by reducing numbers. And we're also able to look at, to extract isotopes from the whale bones, which will tell us something about diet and trophic positioning of the whales in the ecosystem.
Those sei whale numbers have increased, there is still very little known about this endangered species. All the data samples have been sent to the British Antarctic Survey, and some early results from the photo identification work have shown that whales using the Berkeley Sound area have been spotted using other potential KBAs too. But the work isn't finished for Caroline and the rest of the Falklands Conservation team as they start the next phase of the research, listening in on the secrets of this enigmatic creature, which may, in return, allow us to better understand and protect the environment we all share.